And welcome back to Voice Talks, everyone. I'm Sofia Altuna from the Google Assistant team and your host for this monthly voice series. Today, we have a very special episode discussing why diversity, inclusion, and accessibility are essential for voice technology. There's a needed push to make the world equitable for everyone, and voice technology is no different. As more people across the globe build for voice, we have the opportunity to ensure that it's fair, just, and easy to use for everyone. In this episode, we'll be talking a lot about how to build inclusive products. And in doing so, we'll share our own learnings on how the Google Assistant was created to support all different people. So to get us started, let me help you get to know each other. If you have a device near you, then you'll hear these answers directly from your own Google Assistant. But otherwise, you're just going to hear them from mine. Hey, Google, what's your gender?
I don't have a gender.
Did you know that the Google Assistant has no gender? In our first segment today, we'll be discussing this answer in way more detail. And the next question is, hey Google, do you know how many people in the world have a disability?
Here's a summary from the website worldbank.org. 1 billion people experience some form of disability, and disability prevalence is higher for developing countries.
Thank you, Google. You heard it. 1 billion people in the world have a disability. That means that you have at least 1 billion reasons to watch this episode. And I'm really glad that this seems to be top of mind for many of you as well, as you've been sending us videos discussing all the incredible ways you're using voice technology to make the world equitable. We're so thankful for your submissions, and we'll be sending Google Assistant devices to each of the people that we feature today. So to start, I want to share this video from Anna Pugh about how to use voice technology as a hearing therapist.
Hello, I'm Anna Pugh. I'm a hearing therapist audiologist, and a great tool for my clients is the live transcribed feature on Google products. I really appreciate the ability to have video text right next to the speaker's lips, and it helps with understanding what's being said. As everybody is different and everybody hears differently, having the ability to see the words as well as hear them, as well as look at the face, is really important. So when building voice technology, it's really important to include text and subtitles to help with communication, to help with accessibility. And so a larger number of people can hear and see what's going on.
Thank you so much, Anna. We hope that you continue to explore and use voice technology for your patients. Throughout the next hour, we're also going to be playing a little game. So on the last episode, we learned how to gamify education. So I think that it's only fair that I start putting it into practice. So I'm going to tell you that it's no coincidence that I'm wearing all light blue today. I hope that you see that it's light blue. But why? Whomever can guess why I'm wearing light blue first will get a Google Assistant device. You heard me. So you're going to go see hints all throughout the first half of the episode. And as soon as you think you have the answer, you can write in your answer on either the YouTube chat or on the website, however you're viewing this video. And our team will be reviewing it to see who gets it right first. So good luck on this mission. And with that, let's get started into our very special lineup for today, where we're going to be tackling all sides of this topic. Last week, I had the amazing chance to sit down for a fireside chat about diversity and inclusion with two very impressive women at Google. Beth Sai, the Director for Search, Geo, and Assistant Policy, and JeanBaptiste, our Head of Product Inclusion. They give an inside look on how the Google Assistant answers relevant, timely, and sometimes even controversial questions in culture. Then we'll hear from Kiran Kaja, Accessibility Lead for Assistant, in a keynote discussing Google's approach to accessibility. For our product talk segment, we're going to have Kathy Pearl, a conversational design lead for the Google Assistant, discussing best practices on inclusive conversational design. And following Kathy, the CEO of Marvy, Heidi Culbertson, will talk to Mark Tucker in a partner spotlight on how Marvy brings together voice technology and older adults via positive and useful voice apps. And then to close off the show for an ecosystem update, we're going to have Garrison Red, Paralympian powerlifter, which he will have a conversation with Yvonne Salazar, Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations of the Christopher and Dana Reed Foundation. The two will discuss the power of voice technology in the lives of those with spinal cord injuries. So shall we get started? All right. First, we get to time travel for a moment to last week when I had the enormous pleasure of interviewing Beth and Annie from just a different corner of my couch. Let's take a look. Today we have the enormous pleasure to speak with Beth Sai, the Director for Geo, Search, and Assistant Policy, and Annie JeanBaptiste, the Head for Product Inclusion. These two women are at the core of building the Google Assistant to be as diverse as the world itself, ensuring that the product is both inclusive and safe. So thank you so much, Annie and Beth, for joining us today. I'm personally really excited to have you on Voice Talks because I think that the work that you're doing is so incredibly important and unique. And I'm honored that we get to share your learnings and your stories with this community of users and voice developers. So really thank you again for joining. And I wanted to start today by asking you a little bit more about yourself, your role, and maybe one example of the work that you do on Assistant. So maybe Beth, if you can go first.
Yeah, so I'm Beth Sai, and I lead the policy team for the Google Assistant. And we're part of the Trust and Safety org at Google. And so a great way to think about what we do is we are the folks who think about user trust. So that means we think about how to make products safe for users. We make sure there's no bad content on products. And we think about things like privacy and transparency and things like that. So anything that is concerned with user trust is sort of within our purview and what we think about. I've been working on the Assistant since the very early days. I helped launch with Annie, the Assistant on Allo, rest in peace. And from those really early days on the Assistant, we made the conscious decision that we were going to build an assistant that was for everyone. We were going to take inclusive design and make it one of our principles from the ground up. And that principle has, followed us along in the Assistant, in all its iterations through today. And it continues to be one of our core driving goals.
Hi, I'm Annie JeanBaptiste, and I lead product inclusion at Google. Product inclusion is all about bringing an inclusive lens throughout the entire product design process, from the ideation all the way to launch and key points in between. And it's really about building for everyone and with everyone. So as Beth mentioned, we want to make sure that everyone feels seen, validated, and uplifted in our products. And so it's really been a joy to be able to work with Beth and all the teams that help to kind of power the Assistant. One example of that is just bringing what we call our inclusion champions, so underrepresented groups across multiple dimensions of diversity into the fold to help ensure that we were building the Assistant from the ground up with multiple perspectives at the table.
Thank you both. Something that I love and that is really so evident even like from your introductions is how passionate you are about building inclusive products. But I think you've said on multiple occasions that both your personal and professional goal is to make sure that no matter who you are, regardless of your identity, you can identify yourself with the Assistant. And Annie, you've been a huge evangelist for this internally and externally. And congratulations, because I hear that your book is coming out in August, where a lot of people will learn about how we do it internally and to learn about how they can build products for everyone. So huge congratulations. When I first joined the Assistant 3 years ago, something that I was really excited about, and Annie, you mentioned this at the beginning as well, was that really from the start, this product was built with diversity and inclusion. And so you were designing a personality from scratch that was going to be at the mercy of the internet, and people were going to ask it all sorts of different stuff. And then in a way, it will become to represent the voice of Google. So can you share a little bit more about how that beginning process was, and what are some of the dimensions of inclusion and diversity that Google looked at when developing the Google Assistant?
Okay, sure. We look at 12 dimensions of diversity and the intersections of those dimensions. So things like race, age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, geography, culture, etc., and also the intersections of those dimensions, right? Because we know that users have a multitude of things that make them who they are and affect how they move through the world and interact with products. And so we really want to bring all of those dimensions into the fold and really focus on historically underrepresented users who may have been at the margins, right, historically. And so those are really the dimensions that we're trying to bring into the fold. And we want to make sure that we have a lot of voices at the table, right? We understand that communities aren't a monolith. And so it's really about asking who else and bringing more people into the process, whether it's through research and testing or marketing, right? End to end, we're really thinking about what it means to build for everyone, with everyone, and really think about what an inclusive out product or end product would look like.
So I think it's first really important to mention that the personality of the assistant was not created by my team. It was created by our fabulous personality team. It's a team of writers, former artists, comedians, whose sole job was to envision like what the assistant's personality was going to be like, and kind of bring the voice of Google into it. And so myself and Annie worked very closely with them to kind of envision the sort of things that users would want to ask the assistant, and more importantly, the things that users would want to tell the assistant about themselves, right? You've probably seen like assistant branding. We talk about it as your personal assistant. And so if it is like your assistant, then it needs to be able to recognize you, right? So that means regardless of who you are, how you identify, we wanted the assistant to be able to say like, yes, I see you. So, we sat down, we thought, okay, how do people identify? How do people describe themselves? And the personality team made sure that we could answer all of those questions. And we also thought about the controversial things that people might say to the assistant, because let's be honest, like the internet can be terrible, right? I don't have to tell you that. And so we wanted to make sure that when people said those controversial, those shocking, those hateful things to the assistant, that we had good responses, right? That we were responding in a manner that would make users still feel safe. And so that was kind of, our core strategy from the ground up, and it remains our core strategy today.
So going a little bit to the beginning again, one of the earliest examples of inclusivity and the assistant was gender neutrality for the product itself. So can you both share a little bit more about what the process was like and what was the feedback that drove that decision? And also, what has been the feedback to sort of the rainbow of the different voices that we have in Assistant? So maybe Beth, we can start with you now and then go to Annie.
Yeah, so in the really early days of the Assistant, we made the conscious decision to have the Assistant be gender neutral. I don't think it's any surprise to everyone that, there's been a lot of criticism, and probably well-deserved in the media, about virtual assistants and how they tend to have female-sounding voices, and how the fact that they have female-sounding voices actually perpetuates this stereotype that assistants have to be female. And so when we were building the Assistant, the personality team made the conscious decision to have the Assistant be neither male nor female, but be gender neutral and speak openly about its gender neutrality. And, if you haven't asked the assistant, what gender are you, or are you a boy, or are you a girl, I encourage you to do that, right? And listen to what the assistant says. Because that was kind of the starting place for us in terms of challenging these stereotypes about what an assistant has to be. So then it was really only a short leap for us to when we started releasing different voices for the assistant, to not label them according to gender, right? We didn't want to say this is male voice 1 or female voice 2 for a couple of reasons. One, the assistant's neither male nor female, it's gender neutral. But 2, we didn't want to essentialize what gender sounded like. If we said, this is male voice 1, we're making them state the explicit statement, this is what it sounds like to be a man, right? And to us, that was just creating new stereotypes, right? So we said, okay, instead of leaning into the centralization of gender, we're going to assign colors to all of our voices. And that's why today in the Google Assistant app, when you decide to switch your voice, you're presented with a rainbow of colors that you can pick for your voices as opposed to gender labels. And it's, I think, a very brave thing that the assistant team and that our, execs decided to approve and let us do. And I think it's one of the things that makes the Google Assistant very unique, right? And that it's really, making a strong stance about, what gender is and isn't, and what, assistance, can be from the perspective of kind of these gendered stereotypes.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to what Beth said is that, communities aren't a monolith, right? So having a male voice, a female voice, that's not inclusive of everyone, right? Just because even within genders or any other dimension that we're talking about, there's a vast array of people who are different and diverse, right? So I think that it's a testament to, again, including everyone or including as many people as possible to kind of strip away those labels that may be unintentionally exclusive.
No, 100%. And it's so amazing because I've been working on this product for 3 years, and it's really great to hear from both of you how some of these decisions are made. And I actually didn't know about that's why the rainbow of voices, and that's how it happened. So how do you do this on an ongoing basis? How does Google consider inclusion and accessibility, again, on an ongoing basis for all the different product features that Assistant has?
Yeah, so I think the main thing to remember is that product inclusion and building with inclusivity in mind should be end-to-end, right? It's not one point in the process. So for us, we look at 4 main points in the process: the ideation, user research and design, user testing, and marketing phases. But there are a lot of other touch points where you could ask who else and bring in more perspectives. Once you kind of outline and understand the main points in the process, you have to build resources and accountability frameworks behind those, right? So it's really about making sure that this is a holistic kind of look at your design process. It's also about treating it like any other part of the product design process, right? It shouldn't be an afterthought. It should be something that's baked in from as early as possible, and again, at key points throughout. And the final thing I'll say is we really want to make sure that we're bringing a multitude of perspectives at those key touch points, right? So earlier on, Beth talked about like the testing and things like that. We have a group called Inclusion Champions, who are 2,000 Googlers from across many backgrounds and walks of life, who have opted in to what we call dog fooding or testing our products. And so they are really bringing their unique experiences and backgrounds and what makes them beautifully unique into our product design process, because they're coming with feedback, they're coming with experiences that help make the output that much richer.
And you mentioned who else, which I've heard that you're famous for always asking, like, who else? Can you expand a little bit of that, or like what that means to you and how you bring that kind of like to the table throughout the whole product inclusion cycle?
I always say to product teams, I'm a Black woman, I'm left-handed, right? I'm not Black on Monday, a woman on Tuesday, left-handed on Wednesday, right? All of those things are within me, and they affect how I move through the world, how the world interacts with me, and how I leverage products. And so it's really important to think about kind of intersectionality and the multiple dimensions that make users who they are. That being said, I don't represent all Black women, right? There are Black women who are from different parts of the world than I am, who are different ages than I am, right? And a lot of other dimensions that can make people have a different backgrounds or experiences or perspectives. And so it's really about saying, who else, right? Who has historically not had a seat at the table? Who maybe we'd be leaving out? Who else might have a differing perspective, right? We want to have those conversations. We want to have and name kind of challenges or opportunities that there are to serve everyone, right? And we're not going to be able to do that without having those groups and those voices at the table at those kind of critical points in the product design process. So I think as you ask who else, you get to kind of expand the circle of who is kind of providing feedback, and that always leads to better outcomes for everyone, not just for underrepresented groups.
And when you say, because you keep talking about like building for everyone and we bring those people into the conversation, how do we do that? I love that really both you and Beth have continued to say like this product is for everyone and we build with everyone in mind. So how are you both making sure that everyone is involved in this part of the conversation?
I think that one of the things that we want to do is once we've identified where it might be that, we don't have enough voices at the table, to be really intentional, thoughtful about bringing them in. So I think an example of that with the assistant, right, is when there are going to be kind of, new statements added to it, it's not one team that decides that, right? Beth is really good about bringing together a cross-functional group across Google to be able to lend their perspectives, right? So whether it's for like a cultural moment, a holiday, what have you, it's really about bringing a lot of product teams and different teams together, but also bringing a lot of different voices together, right, to weigh in to make sure that across multiple dimensions of diversity, we're getting that feedback. And I think it's important that, within the Google family, right, we can have those conversations. We can name what needs to be named, even if it is uncomfortable or going to be hard to work through. But that's all in service of making sure that all users feel seen and validated. So it's really about if we have to, adversarially test or stress test and try to break the product, if it's about allowing people to test on an ongoing basis, if it's about having focus groups, whatever that is, we're committed to doing that. And that's really a cross-functional effort.
Speaking about bringing new phrases into the assistant. So something that I really admired was how the assistant took a clear stand about Black Lives Matter. So I would like to play for everyone what the assistant responds when you say, "Hey Google, do Black Lives Matter?"
Black lives matter. Black people deserve the same freedoms afforded to everyone in this country, and recognizing the injustice they face is the first step towards fixing it.
I think one of the hardest things in the policy space is sort of keeping your finger on the pulse of the cultural zeitgeist, I would call it, right? And seeing what things matter to users, what matters to the community at large, and kind of where the assistant wants to make a statement and wants to kind of echo those cultural moments. In the case of Black Lives Matter, obviously, Google itself, I'm really proud of them for doing this, decided to take a very strong corporate position, right? Speaking out about the importance of racial equality, of racial justice. And so it was very important to us in this instance for the assistant as the voice of Google to be able to echo that corporate position, right? And give voice to it in a way that, say just, a statement on a Google blog or on Twitter, doesn't really. So, we worked very closely with Annie's team and the Black Googlers Network and our personality team and our marketing folks to figure out how we could turn this moment into sort of an educational moment for users, right? Help them understand, not only what the Black Lives Matter movement is about, but also, help users understand, why, for example, saying things like all lives matter can be problematic, right? And so, I would encourage you, if you haven't tried it, ask the assistant, do Black Lives Matter? Ask it, do all lives matter? See what it says, we think it's a really important conversation we need to be having at this time, and we want the assistant to encourage people, to encourage users to have these dialogues and to understand and grow.
No, 100%. And I really congratulations for that, because I saw that it was not only when people would ask direct questions about do Black Lives Matter, but also when the assistant was proactive about it. When you were to ask Google, how are you feeling? It would say that it was doing all right, and that it understood that the Black community was hurting, and that it stand in solidarity with the community. So I really thought it was so thoughtful, not only from a reactive perspective, but also from a proactive perspective. So really congratulations to both of your teams for that. And something that I was just so curious about is how we work at a big company, right? And I know that sometimes things don't happen as quickly, but how are your teams able to respond so quickly and to stay up to date with the current events and making sure that the assistant is able to answer so many of the different questions that people are asking that are in relation to what's happening in our days to days?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two approaches we take. One, like I mentioned before, sort of proactively, we're always sort of looking to media, looking to kind of the cultural zeitgeist, looking for these moments, things that people care about, things that are issues, right? So that we can react in a timely manner. But also, we have a fantastic team on the trust and safety enforcement side that's looking at reports that they get from users, right? So users can file feedback. They can tell us things that they're unhappy with on the assistant. We also look, at what people are saying on social media about the assistant. places where people are unhappy with how the assistant is responding, or they wish the assistant said something, right? And that helps us like understand, oh, you know, there's a gap here. There's a moment like the assistant can jump in there. So I guess this is sort of, I guess, a plea for all of you out there to you know, please file feedback if you're unhappy with what you're seeing on the assistant, because someone does look at it, I can promise you, and we do use that to kind of shape the decision making.
So later today in the show, we're going to have Kathy Pearl from Google, who's going to be talking about how to design inclusive conversational design. So what advice can you share for others interested in applying similar models that we applied in Google from an inclusion lens in the work that they do every day? And Annie, I know you have a book that's about to launch that talks about this, so I don't want to give too much away, but if you can share something with our viewers today, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, I think just to echo kind of the guidance that Beth provided, I think the first one is to start with equity, right? So it can't be an afterthought. It needs to be something that is a commitment and prioritized just like any other part of the product design process. I think the second is to constantly ask who else, right? Who else needs to be at the table at these critical points? What other voices do we need? Who else might we be able to include and continue to kind of broaden the circle? And then I think it's an iterative process, right? We're on a journey. As Beth mentioned, we're always getting feedback. We want to improve. We want to iterate. We're learning, right? So it's not something that's one and done. So you have to constantly be humble and take the feedback and continue to kind of improve. And I think that's about constantly testing, right? To Beth's earlier point, we're working on this stuff all the time. It's not like the assistant 2 years ago is the assistant now, right? That's always going to iterate and move with the culture, move with society, and move with what users need. And so I think it's really about constantly testing, constantly iterating, constantly asking who else, and bringing as many voices, especially voices that have historically been underrepresented, to the table at those kind of critical points in the product design process.
And I guess my advice here, kind of to follow on what Annie said, would be to not be afraid to take small steps, right? I think that when we think about change, social change, it often feels overwhelming, right? Because we want to change everything at once. But we forget how impactful and how meaningful small incremental changes can be, right? Like the simple act of having the assistant be able to answer the query, do Black Lives Matter? It may feel small and trivial, but it becomes meaningful for so many people. It educates so many people, right? I would encourage everyone to not be afraid of taking those small steps for fear that they're not going to have an impact, because every little bit does have an impact, and sometimes those tiny incremental steps, really turn into something larger.
Thank you, Beth. Words of wisdom. So thank you so much for joining us today, and really for the work that you do every single day, so that people, no matter who they are, they feel identified and they see themselves in this product, and they feel safe and inclusive when using the Google Assistant. So thank you again for joining us today at Voice Talks.
Thanks for having us.
Can you tell how inspired I am from that conversation? On the spot, I volunteered to be an inclusive advocate. I was very impressed with the intention behind building Google Assistant from the start for diversity and inclusion. Building an equitable product or service doesn't just happen accidentally. It happens with intention, and it can yield exceptional business results. So one of my favorite things about working on the Google Assistant is receiving stories about how voice has helped change someone's life. So before we go to the next segment, I want to ask you, how has voice technology impacted your life or the life of someone you know? And you can answer this in the comment section below, or by going on Twitter and using the hashtag #AskSofia. Up next is Kiran Kaja, the accessibility lead for Google Assistant. Kiran is going to discuss how Google approaches accessibility. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Sofia. Hello, I'm Kiran Kaja, and I lead the accessibility program for Search Assistant and News at Google. While accessibility is closely related to inclusive design, in this program at this point, we are mostly concentrating on making sure that we build products, services, and environments for people with disabilities. According to the World Health Organization, there are over 1 billion people around the world with some form of a disability. And this does not include situational or temporary disabilities. For example, you might be driving a car and you should not really be looking at your phone's screen and reading long text messages. Or you might be walking down the street on a really nice and sunny day, but you'll be struggling to read the display on your phone because of reflection from sunlight. There are other instances where you may not be able to interact and use your phone or device or technology in a normal way. Technology can have a profound impact on lives of people with disabilities. It opens up opportunities and access to information that users with disabilities may not otherwise have. In particular, voice technology and digital assistants like the Google Assistant have made people with disabilities live more independent lives. At Google, we want to make sure that we understand the needs of users with disabilities before we start designing any of our products and services. As part of this, we constantly survey and do research with users with disabilities. Most recently, we've done a survey with blind and visually impaired users, asking them about how they use their Google Assistant on a daily basis, what sort of queries they would ask the Google Assistant for, which is things like playing music, asking the weather, setting timers and alarms, asking questions, and so on. This sort of matches what everyone else also uses the assistant for. Technology can have a profound impact on lives of people with disabilities. One of the things that users have always mentioned to us is the fact that the Google Assistant helped them be more independent at home. I have been blind since birth, and one of the challenges that I have is I can't read the display on the thermostat at home, so I can never really adjust the temperature to the level I want it. I want my temperature to be at 74 degrees, and it's always a bit of a hit and miss before I started using the Google Assistant. Now, all I have to do is say, hey Google, set the AC to 74 degrees, and it'll go do it for me. It's as simple as that. Voice technology takes away the complexity in interacting with technology and getting things done. You just ask the Google Assistant to do things for you and goes and does it for you, which is natural and intuitive. When we think about accessibility in the Google Assistant, we are really thinking about 4 pillars. First, we want to understand of users with disabilities. We do this in multiple ways. We try to include users with disabilities in any user research we do as much as possible. Secondly, we also have a group of accessibility trusted testers. These are external users with disabilities who have volunteered to help us test some of our features and products before they are launched. We get really valuable feedback on what we expect from our products from these users. Once we understand the needs of users with disabilities, we then go about making our products helpful for people with disabilities. We have processes and tools in place that product teams can use to make sure that their products and features are accessible. We provide training and consulting for our product teams on accessibility guidelines. And in some cases, we also target products and features at users with disabilities. For example, recently we launched an app on Android called Action Blocks, which is primarily targeted for people with age-related cognitive differences or cognitive conditions such as autism and Down syndrome. What this app allows you to do is create custom buttons and assign pictures or icons or text to them and have them on your home screen. Once you tap one of these buttons, the Google Assistant then goes and does things like your daily routines that you associate with those buttons. So it's a quick single tap, one tap access to the most critical things that you would do on a daily basis. While this is great and helpful for people with cognitive impairments, we also hear from a lot of our users that they really like this customizability. The other feature that I wanted to highlight is on Android smartphones, you can ask the Google Assistant to have it read web pages out loud. For example, if you're on a web page that is a blog post or a news article, you can just say, "Hey Google, read this page," and the Google Assistant will read it out loud in a natural sounding voice. And you can adjust things like how fast the article is read out. You can use a different voice. And we also support over 30 languages at this point. While this is great, it's very helpful for people with visual impairments or reading disabilities such as dyslexia. Everyone else can benefit from it too. You might be cooking dinner in your kitchen and you wanted to catch up on that blog post that you wanted to read. That pillar that we are also concentrating a lot is ensuring that we enable partners to build accessible solutions using the Google Assistant. There are a couple of initiatives that we are working on, and we will have more details of those partnerships announced during the rest of the year. Finally, what we want to make sure is that users with disabilities are able to discover what the assistant can do for them. We do this again in multiple ways. We have the Assistant Accessibility video series on YouTube, where we constantly add new videos explaining how the assistant can be useful for people with disabilities. The link for this is goo.gle/A11y-assistant. We also attend a number of accessibility conferences. We do webinars in partnership with disability organizations. And we also have a number of accessibility support options at Google, including the Disability Support Desk. To learn more about some of our support options, you can go to google.com/support/accessibility. And we tend to post updates about accessible features on our Twitter feed, which is @Google Access. I hope this was a useful overview of some of the accessibility work that we are doing in the Google Assistant. I also hope that it inspired you to think about the needs of users with disabilities and how you can accommodate those in your features and products. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. Very much continuing to feel inspired today. I really love how you mentioned that accessibility is really relevant to everyone, from the billions of people who experience some form of disability to those people driving or just crossing the street and should not be looking at their devices. So I hope that we're all taking away the importance of incorporating these needs in the products that we all build, because they can really have an impact for everyone. Kiran also hosts the Accessibility with Google Assistant YouTube channel, which, as he explained, is a series of videos designed to help the disability community get the most out of their Google Assistant and other compatible smart home devices. It is super insightful, so I highly, highly recommend that everyone checks it out. Before moving on to our next segment, I'd also love to share this video from Natalia Suarez about building a voice experience for people living with dementia.
Hello everyone, my name is Natalia Suarez and I'm a UX designer from the Dominican Republic. I've been working on different voice user experiences for people living with dementia. Both of my grandparents live with dementia, and ever since I've been trying to find solutions to keep them active and engaged. Color Mind is a simple skill that helps people living with memory loss remember colors in life. The skill tests a person's memory by asking them what color something is. Currently, there aren't many solutions out there, so one of my main goals is to create inclusive and accessible skills that are easy to use by them, their carers, and everyone in the family.
Thank you, Natalia. I love this, and I know how helpful it can be for people that need to keep their minds active. So hope that you continue designing conversations for this audience. And talking about design, I like to read a lot about this topic, and there's a really popular book by Kat Holmes called Mismatch: How Inclusion Shapes Design. And in it, she mentions how when creating a product, designers often think about their target audience, but then they overlook everyone else. And a design that excludes the segment of consumers will fail to reach its full market potential. So with this, I'm really excited to introduce our next guest, Kathy Pearl, who's going to be sharing her insights on designing voice conversations and inclusion and accessibility in mind. Here's Kathy.
Thank you, Sofia, for that introduction. Let's talk about a few of the projects that Google's working on to make voice technology more accessible and inclusive. When we talk about how well does speech recognition work, we're often thinking in terms of something called word error rate. That means for every word I say, how many words are recognized correctly. Google's word error rate is about 5%, which means for every 20 words I say, about one of them is misrecognized, which is actually pretty good. That's about on par with humans. But that word error rate doesn't work for everybody. For some folks, maybe who have advanced ALS or have suffered a stroke and it's impacted their speech, voice assistants often don't work very well or don't work at all. So last year, Google announced Project Euphonia. Project Euphonia seeks to solve this issue by building new speech recognition models that will work for people with speech impairments and speech that's difficult to understand, because we want this type of technology to work for everyone. I also want to mention an app called Live Transcribe, which is available on Android devices. And it does pretty much what you might think. As you're speaking, it displays the words you're saying on the device. And it's a great tool for somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing to help communicate. I really like to see how people use this technology out in the wild. And I found this quote from a woman who is a youth boxing coach. And here's what she had to say about her experience using Live Transcribe. In my case, Live Transcribe helps me listen to the kids in a noisy environment. It also detects ambient noises, which give me important situational context. Success in boxing is measured by one's ability to give and receive punches, and technology like this helps me truly engage in the ring, so I can help these kids roll with the punches and rise to the top inside and outside of the gym. Now, I highlighted the part about ambient noises because this is something Live Transcribe does that I think is pretty cool, which is if it detects certain things like music playing, birds singing, it will actually display that on the screen because that's important information to be aware of. The other day I was using the app and singing happy birthday, and it put singing happy birthday up on the app, which was pretty cool. So for me, Live Transcribe is personal. My aunt was born deaf, and over the last few years, her vision has been getting worse, and it's been getting harder and harder for her to read my lips. So we've been using things like writing on whiteboards and typing on the laptop, but it's slow and it's frustrating. So last year, I was really excited to bring Live Transcribe to her and try it out. And I have to admit, she was a little skeptical at first, but over time, she has really begun to appreciate this tool and really values it. And I've been learning some things too. In this photo, which is me with my aunt last December, you'll notice that I'm holding a tablet up under my chin. That's because I realized that so much of our conversation is actually not just those individual words that she's reading my lips. It's also what's going on with my face, what expressions am I making, what's going on with my body language. So now I hold it up under my chin and she can be looking at my face, and when she doesn't understand something I've said, she can glance down and see it on the app. Lastly, I want to mention something called Live Caption, which is available on Pixel phones. So many of you may know that on YouTube, you can get automatic captions on the videos that are uploaded there. But what if you want to watch a video that's not on YouTube? That's where Live Caption comes in. If you have a home video, maybe you're watching a sports recap or something like that, Live Caption will automatically add those captions for you, and it will do it locally on your device. Again, a really nice tool for somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing. But it's not just for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing. It's something that is going to benefit all of us at different times. What if you are in a public space and you want to watch a video but you forgot your headphones? What if you're in a noisy environment and you can't hear the words over the noise? Now let's talk about some of the best practices. So hopefully you're out there either building or thinking about building some great actions or some kind of voice technology. So here's a few things to keep in mind. For starters, let's talk about something called co-design. Now, co-design is not unique to designing for voice, but what it means is that as you're building, as you're designing, you bring the people you're designing for to the table and discuss it with them and design with them. Because so often, I know we often get excited about this problem we're solving, we build something, take it out to the wild, ask people what they think. And sometimes we don't always get the answer we want, like, well, that's nice and all, but I would never use it, or that doesn't really help me at all. So when you bring the people to the table from the beginning, you're going to find that out much earlier on. I like the example of Stephen Hawking. He had one of the first computerized voices back in the early 1980s. And the team that built the voice came up with a better one years later, and they brought it to him. But he didn't want it. It was a better quality voice, but it wasn't his voice. So again, I'm not saying it's easy to always get people to the table that you need, but it's worth the effort because you'll find out if what you're building is actually going to be helping people. Let's think about designing for somebody who is blind or visually impaired, and you're creating something to help them listen to emails, maybe listen to articles, stories, other long-form content. It's essential to have good playback controls, especially to be able to control the speed at which they can listen to the content. I have been astonished at how fast people can listen to content sometimes. So it's really important to make sure you build those controls in. Relatedly, there's something called a breath unit, which you can keep in mind when you're designing. So humans, we only have so much air in our lungs, which means that after I've been speaking for a while, I have to take a breath. And this adds a natural pause to the conversation, which allows you to digest what I've been saying and also opens the door for other people to take turns. You may have heard feedback where someone says, this TTS, this text-to-speech, is too fast. We need to slow it down. But many times it's not that the TTS is too fast. It's that the design has not been following good principles like pauses, turn taking, things like that. So if you hear that feedback, make sure to check the design of your prompts and your turns. Let's talk a bit about designing for multimodal. So in this photo, someone is cooking, and on his right on the counter, there is a Google Nest Home Hub. This is what we call a smart display. What is a smart display? It's not quite a tablet. It's not quite a phone. What is it? Well, it's something we call a voice-forward device. So although you can tap and swipe it, the primary way to interact is through voice. And so you should be able to do everything you need to do that way. So if you're designing for this surface, a great test is to close your eyes and test out what you're building. If you can do everything with your eyes closed, that's great. It's now voice forward. And this means somebody who is visually impaired or blind will be able to use it. It also means if your hands are busy or you're too far away from the device, you can still use it. I've been doing a lot more baking with my son lately since we've been home a lot more. I always forget to take the butter out of the fridge to soften it beforehand. So the other day I said, hey G, show me videos on YouTube of how to soften butter quickly. And it came up with this great video where you get a cheese grater and you grate your butter. And it was perfect because my hands were sticky and I didn't want to touch a device. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about these surfaces. Now, anyone out there who has studied conversation design has no doubt heard of something called the Cooperative Principle, which a British philosopher of language named Paul Grice came up with back in the 1970s as a way to explain how do we have successful conversations as humans. It wasn't about computers back then, but he came up with 4 maxims, which were quality, quantity, relevance, and manner. And if you ever had a frustrating experience with a voice assistant, how is that possible? If you have, it's probably because one of these maxims was broken. So to give you a real life example, if I ask my son, do you know what time it is? And he says, yes, he's breaking the maximum of quantity. He's not really giving me all the information that I really asked for, which is the actual time. Thinking about an example of a device maybe you're building for accessibility, what if you're designing a device where someone who is blind or visually impaired can hold up an object and the device will look at it and say what that thing is? Now, this technology is not perfect. How do you communicate that to your user? Well, you could ignore it. You could just say, if I'm holding up a can of soup, it says, that's a can of soup. This may cause trust issues over time because you're not always going to get it right. You could take the scientific route and say something like, there's an 85.7% chance that that is a can of soup, which is not really how people talk. What about, I think that's a can of soup? What a beautiful, natural way to say, pretty sure it's a can of soup, but not quite. And that's following the maximum of quality, being truthful. So keep these things in mind when you're designing any type of voice experience or conversational experience. Lastly, I just want to reemphasize the point that designing for accessibility and inclusivity isn't just for a small group of people here and there in these small situations. All of us in our lifetimes will benefit from this type of design. We all have situational impairments. We all have times when the technology really works for us. Think about something like high contrast text on a mobile phone, which is good for somebody with low vision. Well, what about somebody who doesn't have low vision and they're walking down the street and it's a bright sunny day? It helps that person as well. What if you are old enough to wear reading glasses and you've misplaced them and you hear a ding that you got a text message? Isn't it nice to be able to just use your voice to have that text message read out loud to you? And of course, not being able to use your hands. Now, for some of us, that might be very temporary. As we're walking in the door with a bunch of groceries, temporarily can't use our hands. Maybe you're a new parent, you're carrying your baby all the time. Maybe you fell and broke your arm, so it's a little bit longer. The point is this technology is beneficial to you. So go out there, build wonderful voice experiences, and just remember that we are building for everyone. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you. It's really incredible what you're doing with your aunt and live transcribe. I love the technique of putting the device near your chin. That was something that I didn't know, so thanks for sharing. And I want to continue emphasizing the wonderful perspective that both Kathy and Kiran shared, that designing with accessibility in mind really means designing for all people and all circumstances. So I love to share this video from Rachel Buckley that's very inspiring, that really echoes what we just learned from Kathy. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Rachel Buckley. In 2018, I was working in tech for a large financial institution when I was diagnosed with tongue cancer for the second time in 5 years. Treatment for my open surgery left me with a significant speech impediment. My family and friends have don't understand the window of what I said, but standards and technology have a very difficult time understanding it. The new disability comes at an interesting time when voice technology is surging forward in our homes and our cars everywhere. This is frustrating, difficult, and a total roadblock for people like me. And I'm not alone. 7.5 million Americans have speech difficulties. That's a lot of potential customers. I have voice assistants in my home, but I can't just ask them to play a song for me. My car has a lot of text for my voice, but not my voice. The devices have been taught to understand speech, and not because understand speech like mine, and do not understand 90% of what I say. A few months ago, I heard about how Google and other companies will start to address the staffing inclusion to people with speech disabilities by building tech that can recognize abnormal speech patterns for a variety of diseases. Since then, I have become interested in learning more about the same time to bring this back, and I've got my voice for samples to build the data for AI to learn. It's an exciting time of growth in voice tech, but this growth will occur with everyone in mind. Learn to design and build technology to understand a variety of speech patterns, or ensure that companion applications are equally as robust as the voice technology itself. Accessibility and inclusion for full spectrum of speech types in voice tech is critical to ensure that millions of customers, users, and employees are not left behind. Thank you.
Rachel, I was so excited to share your video, and I couldn't agree more that this growth in voice should occur with everyone in mind. So thank you so much for both your video and for sharing your voice with Project Understood. Let us know how we're improving, and if we're not, please do send us feedback. As Beth mentioned, we really take feedback seriously and incorporate it into our products. So thank you again so much for sending that video. Before the next segment, I want to highlight a few of the answers that you shared about how voice technology has impacted your life or the life of someone you know. So let me grab my tablet to see the comments. All right, the first comment that I want to share is from Iris Cabrera, and she says, my uncle is blind, yet he has his own NGO where he employs over 15 persons and provides prosthetic body parts for people in need. Voice technology is crucial for him since he can use his laptop and mobile to keep working seamlessly and not slow down his employees. Edie, thank you so much for sharing this incredible comment with us. Please share what's the NGO that your uncle has. I'm so impressed that he has an NGO, that he's able to employ 50 people, and that he's so tech forward and is able to use voice to not continue to slow down his employees. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. The second comment I want to read is from Brooke McCall. And she said, as a quadriplegic, I'm able to initiate my smart home features like my Chromecast, ceiling, Nest, and video phone calls independently. This has been a game changer in my life. The ability to quickly connect with others if I need help gives me fabulous peace of mind. Also, in those months of social distancing, my Google Assistant and I bonded through easy access to information, entertainment, and games I can play using only my voice. Brooke, again, thank you so much for sharing this comment. I feel like we need to bring you on a future episode of Voice Talks because I'm really so inspired with what you wrote. I'm so glad that you've been using these products for a while and that even during this time of quarantine, you've been able to engage with it to find some peace. So thank you again for sharing this. And next, I'm excited to introduce the CEO of Marvi, Heidi Culbertson, and Senior Voice Architect of Soar.com, Mark Tucker, to discuss the nuances they learned in building Marvi for the 50-plus cohort. Let's take a look.
Hello, I'm Mark Tucker. I am Senior Architect of Voice Technology at Soar.com. And our mission is to uplift humanity by bringing uplifting content to people where they are, whether that's in their home, office, or on the go. And we do that with voice technology. Today, I'm speaking with my good friend, Heidi Culbertson. She is the founder of Marvi. So welcome, Heidi. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started in voice technology, and a little bit about Marvi as a company?
Sure, always happy to. My name's Heidi Culbertson. I am the founder and CEO of Marvi. We focus specifically on the over 50 cohort and specifically on active aging. I've spent a career in emerging tech, early adoption, enterprise software, but my entry into voice actually came about for personal reasons. I'm the youngest of a large family, haven't had an older adult parent. My mom was very healthy, very independent, very active, still playing tennis actually until her mid-80s. But she then became blind due to macular degeneration, and it happened quite quickly. So suddenly her life changed, her independence diminished, and social isolation became a pretty big issue. And as a family, we were trying to figure it out. And then fortunately, voice assistants came into the market, and it changed everything. She took to it immediately. She started asking, can it do this? Can it do that? So I began building and creating some family alerts and some basic social engagement experiences that suited our family. As I realized that my mom wasn't alone, there's millions like her, I saw a business opportunity. So I founded Marvi in early 2016. The company name is Marvi. That was my mom's first name, so it's personal to me, and it's now part of her legacy.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I had a grandma who suffered from macular degeneration as well. And I think about how voice technology could have helped her just have a little bit more higher quality of life as well. Today, we're going to talk about two key words, inclusivity and accessibility, and how that relates to voice products. And so can you just talk about the role that you see Marvi playing in both including inclusivity and accessibility in voice technology?
Sure. And this is a really important topic that I'm passionate about. I see Marvi playing a role that's twofold. The first being that I believe that inclusivity needs to include age, and that accessibility means that everyone gets to participate. So we advise companies, organizations, and individuals on what makes up this older adult market, the over 50 population, and how to design specifically for them, not just for healthcare needs. Only 5% of the population actually resides in residential care, like assisted living and nursing homes. The other 95 are aging at home. they're active, they're living longer. We have this demographic shift that's happening as we all are going to live happier, longer and healthier lives. But our primary role is we create and build voice experiences. We focus primarily on where the priorities are: physical health, mental health, and social engagement. So we build utilities, we build fitness and health and wellness, and we build voice experiences that bring about social engagement.
Now, thanks for sharing that. I have a stepmother that she's retired many years now from her government job, and she's active in the community doing service. She volunteers at the schools where my sisters teach. And she's active and knows technology. And she is just one of the many examples of the types of users that would benefit from voice technology. So I know at Marvi that you're passionate about users and you care about understanding and developing voice experiences for them. Can you talk a little bit about things that you've built or are building for Assistant?
Yeah, sure. Recognizing that the older adult population in the US is more than 100 million people, and that it's not just about healthcare. They spend over $7 trillion annually on direct consumable spending. So there's lots of opportunity from a business perspective. It's also about doing social good, where it's important to include this audience. So early on, we built a lot of alert type applications. Right now, we're upgrading a lot of our fitness and exercise voice experiences that we built as voice only a couple of years ago. We have a great interest from Europe to add multimodal and also some different language capabilities. It's interesting. We've learned over the last 5 years of building voice and really designing intentionally for this audience that it's really about what their aspirations and to keep doing what they're already doing. It's not about necessarily fixing a problem. It's about them continuing to live their life. Our society is greatly involved in sport on the whole, whether as a participant or a fan. So one of the projects we're working on currently is a pickleball game that we've had in testing for over a year. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the US. It's highly popular with older adults. It is the sport that many have not heard of. It's a combination of ping pong and tennis and every racket sport imaginable, I think. And so we've been testing, how do you play singles? How do you play doubles? How do we take a sport that perhaps people can't participate the same way they did 20 years ago and turn it into a really cool voice experience? And so we've been doing a lot of testing. Our ultimate goal as voice evolves, as the technology evolves, is to really turn it into a massive social engagement tool. How do we do league play? How do we run and monetize tournaments? So we're really focused on the active aging piece of the older adults. There's 4 generations. And a message to Google right now. I like the new Action Builder quite a bit. I like being able to visually see all the components and the entire interaction model in one console. It's become much easier to bring in high fidelity visuals for multimodal. And being able to create modules of logic that I can connect to content is actually imperative when we build for accessibility. Accessibility is not about disability. Accessibility is about participation for everybody.
Yeah, thanks. I know that some of the work that you do at Marvi, you try to differentiate yourself by not only understanding the user, but also trying to figure out ways to make that more of a personal experience or to be understood. And we've talked before about speech formatting and using tools like speech synthesis markup language, or SSML for short, to adjust that experience. And so I think that's really key. Can you talk about how you use the tools in Assistant, you and your development team, to do that?
There is great difference in speech. And you can take a voice experience that's being built for the masses, and it isn't necessarily a fit for everyone. We are lucky. We've been creating experiences for 5 years now, so we have a lot of data, and we make our design decisions based on the data from the user experiences, from what we see as failures during sessions, and strengths. The best way to explain it is with an example, and I'm going to use an exercise example since that's my theme today. You know, any exercise or fitness or wellness usually has a couple components. It might be an exercise voice experience that has 3 separate exercises, and one might be seated, one might be on the floor, one might be standing. And there's a transition time between, you know, those exercises, and the time it takes to get ready for the next exercise can differ dramatically for someone who's 85 versus someone who's 25, and in between. So what do you do with that time? How do you address that from a usability perspective, from a perspective of, I don't want to not have this audience segment use our voice experience. Do we just lengthen the time? The answer to that is no. You know, do you fill it with music? Do you fill it with a countdown? We choose to use that as an opportunity to gather more context about the user. We do everything by looking at an individual user, and then what are the variations on individual users, and then how do we scale it to the masses? So as an example, we never ask someone their age. We never ask someone their birthday. We actually don't care that much about chronological age. We're more interested in stage of life. So we might ask the question, what was your favorite TV show when you were 10 years old? And if they say, you know, Abbott and Costello, we know they're probably 80. If they say Bonanza, they're probably 70. If they say the Andy Griffith Show and their favorite actor was Opie, they're probably a boomer. And so that tells us a little bit about their age range. And depending on that age, we actually send them down a different user flow, a different conversation flow. If we know we have someone who's 80 and we're aware that as anyone ages, vision loss happens and hearing loss happens, we make sure in a multimodal experience, high contrast, large images, very clear, large font. If it's a 85-year-old, we will send them down a flow where we address prosody. We might slow down the rate of speech. We happen to know that 83% is a good fit for an 85-year-old. We will address pitch because as hearing loss happens, high frequency is a challenge. We will test by putting sunglasses on. We will do a lot of things early on in pre-production so that we can identify a lot of things. And then in live production, the user tells us a lot of information about themselves. And that's data that should be driving design decisions.
Yeah, I know, I agree. As a developer, I see what you're saying, and with just asking a simple question or two, then you get some context around that person without being intrusive. And but also on the development side, I can think of, for this situation, I need to customize it this way or this way or this way, and it's a lot more work on the development side of things. But I think it's really important because we're going to interact more and have a tendency to enjoy those voice experiences that are customized or personalized to us. And maybe they're personalized in ways that we don't even suspect. Like, I don't think anybody would really suspect that length of time transitioning between exercises would be a time where that, you know, there would be a difference in time, but it would just feel more natural and you wouldn't feel rushed, and you'd get to the next part and it would be ready just when you needed it. And I think those things are important. We're going to see that type of stuff more. And, you know, I'm currently working on a game for Assistant right now. And I think it's fun to do the conversation flows, and you've given me some things to think about how can I better appeal to different audiences and not really just do a cookie cutter one size fits all. I'm also interested in interactive Canvas and how we can do a voice plus screen experience for those who own Nest Hub devices. So I think that's awesome. So we've talked about inclusivity, and I just want your maybe some final words on people who are interested in inclusivity or how they can view things differently through that lens.
Yeah, looking at what we can control, because we'll see natural language, and all of that evolving from a technology standpoint. The older adult population is not all white-haired with a walker in dire need of healthcare. They are a massive demographic. They have the most disposable income. They have a need for simple things to be solved, and they still have dreams and aspirations. So the first is just to have an awareness that this population is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for business, and it's an opportunity to affect literally individual personal lives and make life better on a daily basis. And that's huge. It's awesome. So I think that accessibility is all about, for creators and developers, designers, content writers, platforms, remembering that take a step back every step of the way and just give it a thought. Am I accidentally excluding an audience segment that is very interested in using voice technology? I think if you start from there and you then intentionally design differently, it's an important time in our world, and we need to provide access as a voice community in any way we can. And I've said earlier, voice is the right technology at the right time to serve the world today and this demographic shift as we age longer and healthier.
Yeah, I appreciate personally that call to action and encourage others as well. Inclusivity is so important, and just taking that time to think about how your voice experience is going to be used, it's really make a difference. So Heidi, you're just a font of knowledge and fun to talk to every time I talk to you. So I just really appreciate this opportunity. So thank you very much for sharing some time with us today. And back to you, Sofia.
Heidi and Mark, thank you for that insightful conversation. I hadn't heard of pickleball before, but it sounds like a very fun game that I should definitely be checking out. It's great to see that you're also using and enjoying our new Action Builder and Canvas tools, which we discussed in the last episode. And our goal is really to make it easier for you to build. So it's nice to see that your goal is to make life easier for your users. And on that topic, I do want to share a video that came from Laura about the digital interface she created to connect farmers and buyers in developing nations.
Hi everyone, my name's Laura, and I'm here to introduce my digital interface that connects farmers to buyers in developing nations. It's time we create digital experiences that level the playing field. It's time that we include everyone.
Thanks, Laura. This follows the same learnings that Heidi discussed on understanding the user and then ensuring that the tools really work for them. So far in today's shows, we've discussed how Google approaches diversity, accessibility, and inclusion. We've also heard best practices for conversation design. Then we learned how Marvy puts these ideas into practice. And now we're going to hear from Garrison Red, Paralympian and founder of the Garrison Red Project, in conversation with Yvonne Salazar. They're going to discuss how voice technology is used by those with spinal cord injuries. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Salazar, Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations from the Christopher and Dana Reed Foundation. My role is to work with foundations and corporations and help them achieve their goals through philanthropic giving and strategic partnerships. Thank you for having us on Voice Talks for this insightful episode on diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, but also for the opportunity to speak with our friend, Garrison Red. Garrison has many talents. He's a TEDx speaker, a Team USA powerlifter, model, dancer, and most of all, an advocate for individuals living with a disability. He founded an organization called the Garrison Red Project to connect the corporate sector with the disability community. In 2019, the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation partnered with Google Home to provide Google Nest devices to individuals and families impacted by paralysis. And Garrison received one of those devices. But before we talk about that, Garrison, I'd like to go back to when you were 17. You were so young when you experienced a spinal cord injury. Tell us about how it changed your life, how it affected your aspirations.
Okay, no problem, Yvonne. Thanks for the introduction. Like Yvonne just mentioned, at 17 years old, unfortunately, I suffered a spinal cord injury due to gun violence. So let me give you a little bit about myself. Up until then, I was a standout football player for James Madison High School. I was actually 6th in the city in Russian. And I had aspirations on going off to college with a football scholarship and possibly playing professional football one day. However, when life gives you lemons, you got to make lemonade. On an unfortunate night, I was outside and I was struck with a bullet, which left me paralyzed from the waist down. Actually, the T12 section of my spine, to be exact, was the nerves surrounding it was burnt. So with that said, I was in the hospital and the doctor came to me and said, even though you can no longer play football no longer, however, you could still be the coach. I looked at life from an optimistic standpoint from that day on. And I went off to college. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in finance. I worked for the Internal Revenue Service for 6 years. And then one day I had an epiphany and I said I wanted to give back to individuals that suffered a catastrophic injury, such as myself. And after 6 years, I just told my boss one day, I'm leaving and I'm going to start my own organization and I'm going to help millions of people around the world. And the rest was history pretty much from there. However, the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation have been wonderful in my life. From the onset of my injury, my mother knew to reach out to them at that time. This was back in 2005. And ever since then, they've just been a tremendous help to the spinal cord injury individual community and individuals living with paralysis across the world, actually. So the way I actually got involved with Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation is I reached out to them one day. They have like peer mentorship, and I actually wanted to be a peer mentor. And then at the same time, they was developing a blog site where it's called Reeve Connect, where individuals living with paralysis can connect with other individuals living with paralysis just to ask questions for discussion. Because when you're injured initially, especially when I was injured back in 2005, there was really no social media, no outlet you can really like turn to or just to ask a question. And a lot of times with paralysis, it's sharing information when you're living with it, because everybody have a different degree or a different level of ability. If one individual could help another individual just by letting them know how to care for themselves, then it's a tremendous impact. So I always like to thank Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation for bringing the community together.
That's great. It's great to hear about your journey and the work that you're doing through your nonprofit. So I'd love to talk about what life looks like now and how you've been able to incorporate technology. We know that technology can be a huge impact on the quality of life for individuals living with disabilities. It can create greater freedom at home without requiring expensive renovations. So tell us how working with Google and the Reeve Foundation has allowed you to bring voice technology into your daily life.
Yes, voice technology is actually amazing due to the fact that it creates independence for individuals that typically may lack the ability to get up and just easily get up and go turn on their lights, or to easily get up and switch on their TV. A lot of times we take for granted our abilities. And with the Google Home Nest device and the work that Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation did in conjunction by providing individuals with paralysis with the actual device, a Google Home Nest, was amazing due to the fact that I believe they gave out 100,000 devices or somewhere in that area. And individuals now have independence. That's 100,000 individuals that instantly had more independence than they had prior to the device. So that was, I'm really appreciative of it, and I'm really appreciative of how technology is enabling us to live our life to our fullest ability. A lot of times, also, I always think about, like, what if voice technology didn't exist? And believe it or not, voice technology saves a lot of stress on individuals living with paralysis, shoulders, and things of that nature, especially if they are paraplegic and they have to propel their chair with their arms all day long. So thank you for that.
And what are some of the favorite ways that you're using your devices in the house?
My coach always tells me, like, I'm getting lazy due to the fact that the Google Nest home device saves me from getting in and out of my bed, and it just helps me tremendously in different aspects of my life. As far as I don't necessarily have to cut on it, like at night when usually I have to get up and cut on the light. Now I just command to Google, and Google cuts on the light for me. It's just little things that, like I was saying, we take for granted, and the Google Nest home device just increases that independence. Sometimes throughout my day, I actually go to the Google Nest device to check on my plans, or I sometimes input my nutrition into the Google Nest device, so that way I could stay on top of it. So as far as, like, I make an alert and it would alert me at a certain time. Hey, Garrison, this is what you should be eating at this time. So it actually became like another brain for me.
So what we're talking about with voice technology, it's so important to the Reeve Foundation. Our mission is today's care, tomorrow's cure. So focusing on the quality of life today while also discovering cures for tomorrow. We know that for individuals living with paralysis, every door can be a potential obstacle, every button can be a potential hurdle. So voice technology can offer independence and unprecedented freedom at home for you, Garrison, and for the 5.4 million Americans living with paralysis. What would you say to other people living with a disability, and how can they use voice technology, maybe if they're on the fence about incorporating it into their daily lives?
Well, voice technology it's only beneficial. And I think that other individuals living with disabilities, they just need to be a little bit more aware of the benefits that voice technology presents. I know that it's sometimes hard to just go with technology due to the fact that you have a daily routine that you had for years without the particular technology upgrade. So with that said, I do want to make people aware that voice technology is so beneficial in my life, as far as things I just overlooked, like the wear and tear that will go on my shoulders from transferring multiple times a day in and out of the car, in and out of the bed, and in and off the couch, and things of that nature, where it can be saved. Just as simple as you're able to activate your lights without necessarily having to get up or even having to move.
That's great. That's great. So for my final question, a big theme of designing technology for diversity, inclusivity, and accessibility is working together with the communities you're designing for. So how can designers and developers of voice technology make sure they're including the disability community?
Well, one of the ways designers can make sure they're including the disability community is by reaching out to local disability organizations, such as, like, for New Yorkers, I have the Garrison Red Project, where I provide individuals with disabilities with the opportunity to have free resources for whatever their needs and necessities are. Also, I provide individuals with disabilities with free adaptive equipment, so that way they can achieve their independence. But just by reaching out to local organizations, such as the one I have. Also, you could visit the Christopher Dana Reeve Foundation as well. They have tons of information on the website in regards to the disability community and specifically the individuals living with paralysis. So that's one of the ways. Also, if you want, you can follow me on Instagram. I have tons of inspirational videos, so you can get in contact with me that way. even if you just want to ask questions, if you're not local to New York and you're living in California, I might have a connection for you out there. And the only way for designers to actually, design the appropriate products for the disabled community is by actually being around individuals with disabilities and learning about their abilities and where can you help increase their independence.
That's great. That's great. That's amazing advice. And it's so important also to be creating connections and with your organization and our organization at the Reed Foundation for individuals to know that there's a community there, there's resources there. We're always here to support. Well, thank you so much, Garrison, for joining us and for sharing your expertise. To learn more about the Reed Foundation, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Reed Foundation and sign up for our newsletter to learn more about our services and how we're helping advance spinal cord injury research. Thank you, Garrison, for being so open and thoughtful. And thank you, Voice Talks, for having us on.
Yes, have a wonderful day, everyone.
Garrison, Yvonne, that was such a powerful conversation discussing how voice technology can play a role in the quality of life of those with spinal cord injuries. It's amazing to see all of the work that your organizations are doing. And thank you so much for offering that designers and developers can get in touch with you and your organization to learn more about how to include the disability community in their projects. The main takeaway that I'm learning from all of these conversations is how imperative it is to include everyone, bring everyone to the table when designing and building voice experiences. From Annie asking who else to Garrison inviting questions, there's an essential need for a dialogue between communities to continue to build voice technology for everyone. And lastly, I did promise I would reveal why I'm in all light blue colors. So after talking to Beth and Annie, I was very inspired by the work that goes into every aspect of designing a product with inclusion in mind. So here's a recap of the 3 hints that you hopefully noticed. The first one was while listening to Beth talk about the rainbow of options for assistant voices. The second one was listening to the actual voice of my assistant. And then the third one was just seeing that I was wearing all light blue colors. So why did I choose to wear light blue today? And it looks like Susan Cooper guessed it right. Light blue represents the persona that I use for my Google Assistant. And I actually want to read you what Susan wrote because I just thought that she really nailed it. So Susan said, Sofia wearing blue to highlight that you can pick a color for the voice, as Beth said earlier. So you could have a blue voice and ask to use that as a setting. The idea being that you can choose your own color for the voice so it gets away from pink and blue stereotypes. Susan, that is amazing. Each voice on the Google Assistant has a color, and just as the colors have many different meanings throughout our cultures, the color of each voice and assistant has a distinct sound, speed, and personality. And we hope that everyone chooses a voice that they really enjoy and that they find comforting. So congratulations, Susan. You're getting a Google Assistant device, and we'll be in touch with you very shortly to sort out all the details. So with that, it's almost time to end today's episode. And I want to say a special thank you to our incredible guests this month, Beth, Annie, Kiran, Kathy, Haiti, Mark, Garrison, and Yvonne. I'm in awe of the amazing work that each and every one of you do every single day to make the voice community safe and inclusive for everyone. I also want to thank our amazing crew behind the scenes, and a special thank you to you always for joining us on another episode of Voice Talks and for sharing your videos, your ideas, and your comments with this amazing voice community. Today, we discuss how to build inclusive products that speak to everyone. And in our next episode of Voice Talks on August 27th, we'll be discussing how other brands are using voice to speak to their customers. So if you have any questions at all, please start sending them to us because in our next episode, we're going to have a special segment with our developer experts, Jessica Denaire Early-Cha and Mandy Cha, who you met on the last episode. So please, if you have any questions, start sending them to us at voicetalks.ai. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll see you again on August 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Ciao!